Hey guys, so if you are all meme connoisseurs like I am, you're probably familiar with the OK Boomer meme. Well, what do you think generational conflict and and socialism have to do with each other? Well, you're about to find out. This year, in 2019, the Victims of Communism Foundation conducted a poll of the different generations to find out which generations have favorable opinions of socialism or capitalism or whatever. Turns out 70% of millennials and 64% of Gen Z have a favorable view of socialism, but these same generations, only about half of each, have a favorable view of capitalism. So, this is interesting, but first we should define what exactly these generations are, and that might give us some answers. So, according to the Pew Research Center, millennials were born between the years 1981 and 1996, whereas Gen Z was born between the years 1997 and 2012. What's important about this is that the oldest millennials, this means that they were only 10 years old by the time that the Cold War ended, which means that they weren't as exposed and barraged with anti-communist propaganda as older generations. And this also means that they couldn't really internalize it then. So what do I mean by anti-communist propaganda? Well, show of hands, who's seen the movie Red Dawn? Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a textbook, really cheesy propaganda movie. Would recommend. So basically, Soviet Union invades America, they murder a bunch of civilians, put people in concentration camps and mass executions, all that type of stuff. And this basically reflects the ideas that older generations had of socialism, but millennials weren't really, I don't know, they were only 10 when that happened, so you know. But anyway, so if the Cold War was I guess, kind of the defining thing for older generations before millennials, then what's the defining thing for millennials and even Gen Z? Well, that would be 9/11 and its aftermath. So, I don't know, a lot of you might be a little too young to remember it, but 9/11 happened. It wasn't a fun time for most people, to say the least. And this happened as millennials were coming of age, like becoming adults and everything. And so a lot of them joined the military as just a knee-jerk reaction to it. And as a result, a lot of millennials participated in the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. As a result, a lot of millennials are impacted by issues veterans face, such as PTSD, suicide, all that type of bad stuff. On top of that, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and all this other stuff put us trillions of dollars in debt as a country. And what makes things even worse is in 2008, we had the Great Recession, which was the largest economic downturn that the U.S. has faced since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Basically, Cold War era economic policies involving like free market capitalism, deregulation of banks and businesses, the whole idea of trickle-down economics and being too big to fail came to a head and basically imploded on itself. And millennials were among the hardest hit by this. And millennials in general a lot of millennials spearheaded the Occupy Wall Street movements. So, what does this have to do with socialism? And where does Gen Z come into play? Well, look no further than Bernie Sanders. I'm sure, good guy Bernie Sanders. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Bernie Sanders. He identifies as a socialist. He believes in universal health care and free college, all that type of stuff. Well, during his presidential campaign, he garnered a lot of support from the oldest Gen Zers who were able to vote at this time, and millennials who had been disaffected by all these things that happened in the previous decade. He basically catered to a lot of the things that millennials cared about: income inequality, global warming, foreign wars, all that type of stuff, and he really ran with it. On top of this, he exposed millennials and Gen Z to the idea of socialism. And even though he lost, it wasn't necessarily all in vain, because here's the significance. Millennials and Gen Z, having gone through 9/11 and or its aftermath, and being exposed to if not necessarily socialism, but at least the concept of its general ideas, are taking it and running with it, really. And in the aftermath of Bernie Sanders' run, we've elected millennials into office. For example, we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, who's actually born 5 years early to be a millennial, but still will count her. They're amongst of our most progressive politicians, and they're very young by politician standards. So really what this shows is that they're spearheading a growing progressive movement that's aiming to tackle a lot of the issues that millennials and Gen Z care about, such as global warming. We have AOC's Green New Deal and all that type of stuff. So what this means is that hopefully, time permitting, because global warming won't wait, but time permitting, and assuming we have enough time, millennials and Gen Z can hopefully not only transform the country to be more progressive, but also hopefully change the course of our history. So thank you.